much, Dr. Rutherford. You may leave that microphone however you need to position so that you may offer to take the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Rutherford.
Good morning.
Are you currently employed?
No.
And why is that?
I retired from the University of Texas faculty at the end of August.
So you're less than a month into your retirement?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you a medical doctor
Yes.
currently?
Yes, I do have a full license to practice medicine.
Okay. So I first want to talk about your education training experience. You have a bachelor's degree.
Yes.
And what's your bachelor's degree in?
It's in a program called Plan 2 that is offered at the University of Texas at Austin.
And what year did you graduate from UT Austin?
1974?
Did you go directly into medical school after that?
Yes, sir.
And where did you go to medical school?
The University of Texas Medical School in Dallas.
And what year did you graduate from there?
1978.
So after you graduate in 1978, do you do a residency?
I did.
And where did you do your residency at?
I did a pediatric residency at the University of Texas Medical School in Galveston.
And so at the medical school at UT Galveston, how long was your fellowship?
Well, it wasn't a fellowship.
I'm sorry, your residency.
Residency, it was 3 years.
And so upon completing the residency, did you immediately go into any further education?
No, I actually went into general pediatric practice in suburban Houston.
And how long did you do that?
12 years.
Did you eventually go back and receive further, let's say, formal education?
I did not pursue additional residency training or fellowship training or any formal training of that nature, but physicians in Texas are required to obtain a minimum of 24 hours of continuing education every year, and I met or exceeded that requirement every year.
So eventually did you join the faculty at Driscoll Children's Hospital?
I did.
And when was that?
It was 1993.
And what was your role as part of the faculty?
I was the assistant director of the pediatric residency program there, and I developed a clinic for evaluating children who may be the victims of abuse or neglect.
And did that happen all at the same time?
Well, I got to Driscoll Hospital, this is in Corpus Christi, in 1993. I started the child abuse and neglect program in 1995.
Okay. And did you eventually leave Driscoll?
Yes,
When was that?
1996.
And why did you leave?
The University of Texas Medical School in Galveston offered me a position there to basically do the same thing, to be in charge of their program for evaluating children for abuse or neglect.
And that was in 1996?
Yes, sir.
And then how long were you at the medical school in Galveston?
11 years.
Do you hold any board certifications?
Yes, I do.
And what are your board certifications in?
I'm board certified in general pediatrics, and I'm board certified in child abuse pediatrics.
When did you receive your board certification for general pediatrics?
In 1982,
And when did you receive your board certification for child abuse pediatrics?
2009.
And was there a child abuse pediatrics board specialization prior to 2009?
No, there was not.
Were you in the first class, the first group of doctors to receive this board certification?
Yes, sir.
So you were in Galveston for 11 years. What are you doing during those 11 years?
So I taught medical students and residents. I also was a what's called an attending pediatrician in the general pediatric clinic, and I also had a clinic about half of my time was was spent in the clinic for examining children for child abuse or neglect.
So after those 11 years, what did you do?
So in 2007, I was recruited to come to the University of Texas Medical School here in San Antonio and practice full-time in the child abuse and neglect program here, which is called the Center for Miracles. And after about a year or so, I actually was named the medical director of the Center for Miracles.
So those 11 years in Galveston, did you have any type of relationship with what's now known as the Center for Miracles while you were working in Galveston?
The child abuse pediatrician here in San Antonio prior to my arrival for many, many years was Dr. Nancy Kellogg, and she basically was my mentor. I met with her at least on a monthly basis starting in Corpus Christi, when I was in Corpus Christi, and she helped me to develop the program in Corpus Christi, and then we continued to maintain contact and collaborate on projects, etc. During my time at UTMB in Galveston.
And when again were you named director of the Center for Miracles?
I believe it was 2008.
Okay. And then did you remain the director until your retirement last month?
Yes, sir.
Have you been published before?
Yes.
I know it's probably not a fair question, but do you know how many times?
I have authored or co-authored about 30, I believe it is, articles in what are called peer-reviewed journals, and about a dozen or so other publications.
Okay. Have you been specifically published even on starvation?
Yes.
As it relates to the Center for Miracles, not necessarily at the beginning or at its inception, but let's say even as of 2021, did it have a fellowship program?
Yes, we've had a fellowship program starting actually before my arrival. I believe it started in 2006.
Okay. And what is the point of a fellowship program?
So if someone finishes their residency, for instance in pediatrics, and then they decide that they want to sub-specialize in a more narrow part of the field, then they take on extra training, typically for about 3 years in that field, and that's called a fellowship program.
Okay. So fair to say the program teaches other medical doctors about the specialization of child abuse pediatrics.
Correct.
What is the Center for Miracles?
I'm sorry?
What is the Center for Miracles?
It is a program that is supported by Christa Santa Rosa, also known as the Children's Hospital of San Antonio, and we have an outpatient facility across the street from the hospital where we examine children there who may be the victims of abuse or neglect, and then we also see children in 3 of the large hospitals here in town as well, if they're in the hospital for concerns for abuse or neglect.
So, just want to talk about patients that the Center for Miracles actually sees, like in person. How does a child come to be evaluated in person by the Center for Miracles?
The child has to be referred to us by either Child Protective Services, by a law enforcement agency, or by another physician.
And why would they refer a child to be seen by you?
We are recognized in the medical community in the area as having a particular expertise and training and skills in evaluating injuries for possible abuse or neglect that most other physicians don't have.
So are children brought to you referred to you because there's a suspicion, particularly that there's some type of child abuse?
Yes.
Other than seeing children in person, does the Center for Miracles also do consulting work.
Yes.
And what does that look like?
Well, and this happens mostly for Child Protective Services. They frequently will send us a case file that would be interviews and other records that they may have, medical records that they've collected and photos, and ask us for our opinion about the likelihood of a child's injuries being due to abuse or neglect.
Okay. So I want to talk about the findings that the Center for Miracles can make in evaluating a case. When we use terms like non-specific, what does that mean?
So, particularly in the cases where we're reviewing a file rather than examining a child in person, when it comes time for us to make a conclusion about our level of concern for abuse or neglect, we basically have 4 levels of concern. We either say that we have no concern for abuse or neglect, or we say that we have some concern, or our highest level would be that we feel there's substantial evidence for abuse or neglect. But if we really can't distinguish between whether an injury is likely to be due to abuse or due to some other cause, we say that the injury is non-specific. In other words, we just can't tell.
So a non-specific finding, does that mean that you are ruling out child abuse?
No.
And it doesn't mean also that you're ruling in child abuse?
Correct.
Does the Center for Miracles, or at least did it while you were the director, maintain statistics as it relates to findings of concern for child abuse?
Yes.
And what is that?
Well, the last time that we did this evaluation of our cases, which was probably about a year ago, the numbers basically came down to about 52% of the time we either had a concern for abuse or neglect, or we felt there was substantial evidence. And 48% of the time, we felt there was either no concern for abuse or neglect, or that the finding was non-specific.
And again, the statistic that you're keeping is not just of the general population, correct?
No, it's just cases that are referred to us or children that we see. So we're not saying that 52% of children in San Antonio have been abused. We're just saying of the cases that are sent to us for evaluation, a little over half, there is indeed a concern for maltreatment, but a little under half, we really don't feel that it reaches that level.
Okay. I want to talk about the starvation process or malnutrition process generally. Is starvation always the complete elimination of food?
No.
Okay. Are there forms or degrees of starvation that include a person or a child would be receiving some level of nutrition?
Yes.
Does starvation have a meaning to you within the medical community?
Yes, it does.
And what is that?
It really implies a degree of malnutrition where that is so severe that a child is starting to have severe effects on their bodily function or development, and it could even be to the point of being at risk of death or dying due to the severity of the malnutrition.
Okay, and what is malnutrition?
Okay, so a child has to have a certain amount of consistent nutrition given to them in order not only to provide for their bodily function, but also to allow for their bodies to grow. In other words, to form new skin, new bone, new muscles, all the conditions that are involved with growing and developing. And if they don't have that amount of nutrition that allows them to progress normally, then that's termed malnutrition.
Is there any correlation between starvation and dehydration?
Yes. In most instances, if a child's not receiving enough food, like in other words, protein and calories and so forth for their function, usually they're also not receiving enough fluids. And so if someone becomes really behind on their fluid balance in their body, that's called dehydration.
Is there also a distinction between what some doctors might say failure to thrive versus malnutrition and or starvation?
Failure to thrive is a term that is used a lot in pediatrics anyway, referring to babies and small children that are receiving enough nutrition to allow for some growth and some development, but that it's not optimal. And so, in other words, the children are not thriving, which means growing and developing as they should, but there's still some nutritional support, so they are achieving some of those milestones. Whereas malnutrition implies a greater degree of lack of access to nutrition, and then starvation would be the most severe, where the bodily organs are starting to be damaged.
Okay. What types of things would you, as a clinician, want to review prior to determining or forming an opinion as it relates to whether a child is suffering from malnutrition and or starvation?
Well, really the key to the diagnosis more than anything else is the child's growth chart, how the child has been growing over time as compared to the standards that we expect a child's growth and development to meet. In other words, there's a range that's considered normal growth and development, and that range allows for kids that are big and kids that are little, but and everything in between, but that are growing normally, versus children that are not growing normally, that they're so far under the range of other children that there's a concern that there's a problem with that child.
Okay. Are there different types of starvation? And let me be a little bit more specific to that question. Maybe people might think of starvation of these infomercials where there's the African children with these distended bellies. Is that a different form of starvation or malnutrition?
Well, what I would say is that malnutrition and starvation can happen for more than one reason. Like, for instance, if a child is in an environment where the food is just literally not there, then they can become malnourished because of the famine situation that their environment is in. Whereas other cases that we see are children who live in, for instance, most children here in the U.S. have access to food, their families have access to food and nutrition and so forth, but for a reason they are either not being given that nutrition, or they have a problem with their bodies, for instance, an intestinal problem, let's say, that is interfering with their ability to absorb the nutrition that they're given.
Did you review medical records as it relates to Benjamin Savetta with a date of birth of September 28th of 2016?
Yes, I did.
And what medical records do you recall reviewing?
I reviewed his birth records from Metropolitan Methodist Hospital. I reviewed some outpatient pediatric records from when he was an infant. I reviewed several emergency room visits to Children's Hospital of San Antonio, one to Northeast Baptist Hospital emergency room, and a few additional outpatient visits to ear, nose, and throat doctors and to a pediatrician. And then the medical records also relating to, for instance, his autopsy after he passed away.
Okay. Why is it important to review as many of the medical records, specifically in a case concerning malnutrition and starvation?
Well, first of all, that's really where the most reliable information is going to be about how the child has been growing. In other words, most of the time when a child goes to either the doctor or to the hospital, they are weighed and measured. And so we can, if we can accumulate those weights and measures and chart them against the normal growth chart, that's really very important for us to be able to determine whether or not the child's been growing normally. The other thing is, usually there's information in there that really helps guide further evaluation of what may be causing the child not to grow normally.
So in your review of, I'm going to call him Benji when I refer to Benjamin, did you review Benji's medical records and look at the weights over those periods of time?
I did.
And did it appear to you that Benji, for the majority of his life, struggled or had issues gaining weight?
No, in my opinion, he didn't initially have trouble gaining weight. He was born prematurely and he was small during the first year or two of his life, but he actually grew within the normal limits.
So I want to talk about Benjamin. He was born premature?
Yes.
What effects with him being born premature would you expect to be seen in the medical records and or any long-term complications of that?
So the typical growth charts that we use to evaluate these situations are all derived from full-term babies and how they grow. And so if a baby's born prematurely, that's going to make them look small initially on a standard growth chart. And so typically, like for instance in Benji's case, he was born about 5 weeks early. For about the first year or so of life, he's going to look smaller than the other children, even though it really just reflects his prematurity, not necessarily that there's a problem. But after about the first year or so, their growth pattern typically fits the growth pattern of the general population of children.
Okay. Would you expect him at 4 years old to still have lingering effects of his premature birth?
No, that can happen, but that's typically a problem more in children that are born months early, not a few weeks early.
Did you create a growth chart in this case?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 216. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This is a growth chart that I prepared where I took weights from different sources and placed them on a single growth chart so that they could be evaluated more fully. And this started when the first point I put on there, he was about 3 years and 4 months old. And then there were some additional points leading up to what he weighed when he was dead.
And this doesn't contain all of the weight points throughout Benji's life.
No, we had some pretty good growth charts already that had been prepared, like from weights from the pediatricians in the hospitals that covered the first year or so of his life. So I didn't really feel the need to duplicate that. But we had more issues with the weights when he was older, like 3 and 4 years of age, because they were from all different kinds of sources.
Okay, so this just contains a total of how many points?
6.
And this growth chart that you're looking at as it relates to the weight, what is the source of the, not Benji's points, but the overall chart?
Oh, the overall chart is a growth chart that's was developed by the World Health Organization and is one of the standard growth charts that's used worldwide.
And I'm not going into like the specifics of the calculations and the math, but the World Health Organization, the data that's contained in it, fair to say that's the world's population that's taking into account?
Yes, that's correct.
So this isn't necessarily specific to the United States.
It isn't actually. It actually, we do prefer this one for the older children specifically because it takes into account ethnic differences, regional differences, things like that.
Okay. I'm going to show you what I'm going to mark as States Exhibit 217. Do you recognize States Exhibit 217?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This is a growth chart that I prepared of some of Benji's height points, starting from when he was not quite 3 years old.
Okay. And I want to talk about measuring of children's lengths in their height. Are those numbers always going to be necessarily reliable?
No, unfortunately, especially with small children, trying to measure their height actually is kind of difficult because they don't always cooperate and they don't always stand still and those kind of things. And so you really have to have a pretty well-trained individual that's obtaining the height. And so in this case, I had data from different hospitals and different offices and so forth, and it was pretty clear that not everyone was being as careful as they could. And so I tried to basically pick 4 points that I felt were representative and most likely to be appropriately obtained.
Okay. And do you believe that this information, States Exhibit 216 and 217, would be useful to the jury in understanding your testimony today?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to admit States 216 and 217 and tender to defense or objections, if any, and as previously tendered in discovery.
Your Honor, may I say one brief word I was prior?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Dr. Lucifer, you would agree that in the last, so on your chart, looking at the one for height, States Exhibit 217, you only report 4 heights, correct?
Correct.
And the first one you say is starting from June 23rd, 2018, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and from June 23rd, 2018, he has other measurements, or 10 total. From June 13th to the date he passes, his height is measured 10 times by different doctors, correct?
Yes.
But you've only put 4 on here.
Correct.
And so, you wouldn't want to mislead the jury into believing that this is the accurate data that was collected for Benjamin, correct? Because this isn't an accurate data set. This is just the ones that you picked out.
Well, I disagree with that. I feel that it actually is more accurate and is more reliable because I didn't put down the ones that looked unreliable.
So, but in determining what is reliable, you have now interjected your beliefs as to why one number may or may not be reliable, correct?
Judge, at this point, I'm gonna object, this seems outside the scope of what should be for hire, this is cross-examination essentially.
Well, I think she's trying to go to the veracity of the chart. I'll overrule it, I'll allow the source to continue listening to.
So, for instance, I mean, on June 23rd, 2018, you put on your chart that he weighed 82 centimeters, correct? Wait, I'm so sorry, that he measured in height, 82 centimeters.
Correct.
And then you put on February 3rd, 2020, he measured 90 centimeters.
Yes.
But then you leave out the very next one, which is September 23rd, 2020, when he is measured at 99 centimeters, correct?
Correct.
You leave out the one on December 9th, 2020, that he was measured at 95 centimeters.
Yes.
Then you include the 3/25/2021 at 99 centimeters, correct?
Yes.
But then you leave out on May 1st, 2021, the 99 centimeters at CHOSA.
April 1st, maybe?
What did I say? I'm so sorry.
May 1st?
I apologize. Thank you. April 1st, 2021, the 99 centimeters at CHOSA.
Yes,
You
I
leave that one
remember.
out. You include in your final data point, July 21st, 2021, 97 centimeters, correct?
Yes.
But then you exclude the next three data points. There's also, on the same date, on 7/21/2021, you exclude 89 centimeters at Little Buddies, correct?
Correct.
You exclude on 7/26/2021, the 94 centimeters at Little Buddies.
Yes.
Oh, I apologize, that would not have been at Little Buddies, it would have been at, the ENT of San Antonio. Is that correct?
No, I have that the July 26th measurement was at Little Buddies Pediatrics.
Then let me back up. When I said July 21st, 2021, he had two measurements. He had one at CHOSA that you included for 97, but then he also has one at the Pearl ER for 89 centimeters.
Correct.
Okay. And then finally, you do not include the weight, or excuse me, the height at the autopsy, time of autopsy, as being the 99 centimeters, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, at this time, Your Honor, I would just, I would object because it's not a full data set, and while he can make conclusions from the data, he has left off significant ones, and the ones he has cherry-picked out of it, mislead the jury.
It's the same argument we've had for all of the growth charts. This is what he based his opinion on. All of this was essentially cross-examination that she's been cross-examining on, but this is the basis of his opinion as it relates to the height and his ultimate opinion as to the meaning behind those heights.
The defense's objections to states 216 and 217 are respectfully overruled. They are admitted and may be published.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, I want to talk about that. As it relates to the heights, are you going to put height on this chart? If I'm understanding your testimony correctly, you are not going to put heights on this chart that you do not believe are reliable.
That's correct.
Okay. Does a child, when she cited some of these, specifically the Pearl ER, where he's 89 centimeters, and then, which was on about a month before he passed away, compared to his length at the autopsy where he is 99 centimeters, did that seem to you to be a reliable value.
No, it did not.
The points in data where she's talking about potentially where he's 99, and then the subsequent measurement is that he is 95 centimeters, let's say. Do those seem consistent to you?
But they don't.
Your children typically get shorter.
They don't typically shrink.
Okay. So, what I first talk about is safety exhibit number 216, which is a copy of your growth chart. When you're looking at this growth chart, what about it informs your decision as to whether Benji was suffering from malnutrition and or starvation?
So, just real briefly, the key lines on there are what we call the percentile lines, and there's one in the middle that's labeled 50, and that's the 50th percentile, which means average. And then the top and bottom of the diagonal lines are the 3rd percentile and the 97th percentile. And within those two lines, that's considered the normal range for a child's weight growth over time. And most children kind of follow more or less one of those percentile lines. And I believe you can see on there that between his 3rd and 4th birthday, Benji was roughly following what's called the 15th percentile, which means that he is heavier than 15% of children his age and lighter than about 85%. So that's considered normal, and as you can see, there's a nice steady upward trend there at his 4th birthday, and then after his 4th birthday, he actually loses weight very dramatically, and by the time he was 4 years and 10 months, which is the second to the last dot, 4 years and 10 months, he actually dropped to the bottom range of what's considered normal. And then at the time of his death, he had actually fallen to the point where he was outside of the normal range. In other words, his weight was so low that it really is very unlikely to be a normal, healthy weight, especially compared to where he had been less than a year earlier.
So when we're looking at the two first points, number one on February 3rd of 2020, and the second point on September 29th of 2020, both of those indicate that Benji was on the 15th percentile growth curve.
Correct, which is normal. He was a little guy, but he was a normal little guy, and one of the indicators of that is not only being in what we consider to be the appropriate range, but also that he was growing. He was gaining weight on a path that's similar to all the other children his age.
And looking at point 2, 9/28 of 2020, that is on or around that is on his 4th birthday.
It was, I think it was, yes, actually the day after, 9/29.
Okay.
Was when that was.
Okay.
So essentially on his 4th birthday.
And then from 9/29 to the ultimate point on here, point number 6, are you going to be looking at the individual points as it relates to informing your opinion, or are you looking at the trend?
I'd say both.
Okay. What about the trend helps inform your opinion?
Well, children should be growing in childhood. They shouldn't be losing weight because that's really not what we expect them to do if they're receiving the appropriate amount of nutrition to support their growth and development. They should be continuing to gain weight steadily and consistently. And so when we see a pattern like this where a child's having a very dramatic loss in weight, that indicates a really significant problem.
Which individual points, if any, will inform your opinion as it relates to whether Benji suffered from malnutrition and starvation?
would say, particularly the last 2 points, indicate that, he's, whatever is happening to his body has become so severe that he's no longer, in what's considered to be the normal range for a child with Sandwich.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit number 217. This is the height chart, correct?
Yes.
And when we're looking at this point, the first point on 6/23 of 2018, and I believe this third one's actually supposed to be 3/25/21.
Oh, I apologize, I think you're right about that. Yes, it should be 325.
Okay. So we're looking at points 1 through 3. What does this tell you?
Well, what it shows is that before his 3rd birthday, he was still, in terms of his height, not in the normal range for, compared to other children his age. And that was consistent with some of his growth points when he was smaller. When he up until a little before his 1st birthday, he was being weighed and measured regularly by his pediatrician, and so he was also running along the lower limit of what's considered the normal range for length, is what we call it in baby, at that time. So he, and a lot of that was probably related to his prematurity, and it looks like by his 3rd birthday, he was still in the process of recovering, either from being a premature baby or from some other unknown reason why he was very small as a small infant. But the point of this is that he appeared to be recovering, especially after his 3rd birthday. There appeared to be a very good upward track, so that by the time he was 4 and a half, he actually was within the normal range for height.
Okay. Does this also show that his height is growing during this period of time?
Yes, he's actually growing a little bit faster than the typical child his age, because he's going from being what we would consider to be abnormally short to actually at the lower end of the normal range.
Okay. As it relates to Benji's height, was there any evidence in the record that he measured higher than 99 centimeters or longer than 99 centimeters?
No, that was the maximum height measurement that was recorded in any of the records that I reviewed.
Do you recall when it was first, when he first measured 99 centimeters?
I'm pretty sure that was September 29th of 2020 at Northeast Baptist Emergency Department.
Okay, so that would, September 29th of 2020 would have been around his 4th birthday.
Correct.
So from 4 years old to his ultimate death at 4 years and 11 months approximately old, is there any evidence that Benji grew in height?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
Let me phrase it this way. Is there any evidence between his 4th birthday visit and his ultimate death?
Your Honor, I'm gonna object because he just stated that the 9/28/2020 data point was, in his opinion, not accurate, and he left it on his chart, and now the state is trying to use that to rely on for a premise that would mislead the jury.
I'm gonna have to have Mr. Daniel finish his question so I can make sure I know where you're going. Do you mind finishing the question?
If I could finish this.
Sure.
So, between the points of September 29th of 2020 and his ultimate death, which is August 17th of 2021, which is approximately when he was 4 years and 11 months, during any period of that time, is there any evidence that he measured higher than 99 centimeters?
And before you answer, Dr. Woodford, your objection, Ms. Lawyers, is?
Yes, he's trying to imply that the child did not grow at all for that state's trying to rely on what their own witness already said wasn't reliable to make this inference that he didn't grow it.
So it's based on a 702 objection?
Yes.
Okay. That is respectfully overruled. You may
I would say that there's no evidence that he ever measured higher than 99 centimeters, including after his work.
Okay. When you reviewed the medical records, did you see any indication that a parent or guardian had expressed concerns to medical professionals relating to the ability for Benji to gain weight prior to his appointment with, not appointment, rather his visit at CHOSA on September 21st of 2021? I'm sorry, July 21st of 2021.
Prior to July 21st. I'm sorry, I am gonna look at a couple of records real quickly to make sure about that, if that's all right.
Okay.
But no, sir.
Okay. So based on your review of the medical records, no caretaker has expressed to medical professionals, based on those records, that they had concerns with Benji gaining weight. Is that correct?
Correct.
I want to move on from the growth curves and talk about some other potential findings. What is Lanugo?
Lanugo is a type of hair growth where the hair is very fine and is in locations that are not typical for hair growth to happen.
And does that hair have a particular texture or presence on certain parts of the body?
It typically has a really soft feel to it, and sometimes it's the kind of hair that people refer to as peach fuzz.
As it relates to malnutrition and starvation, is there any correlation between Lanugo?
Between Lanugo and starvation?
Yes.
Yes, there is.
And what is that?
Well, that is a characteristic that is frequently observed in people, young and old, but especially children who are experiencing starvation, is that they will start developing this Lanugo hair growth on unusual parts of their body.
And I'm not going to previously, you have permission to move for any further. Thank you. I'm going to show you what's already been admitted as State's Exhibit number 7. As State's Exhibit number 7 relates, his hair on Benji's back, does that appear consistent to you with Lanugo?
Yes, it does.
Did you take this into consideration when you formed your ultimate opinion as to whether Benji suffered from malnutrition and starvation?
Yes, I did.
Would it be normal or ordinary for a 4-year-old to grow that hair on their back?
I mean, there are some children who have hair on their backs normally to some degree, but in this particular instance, I'd have to say, based on my experience, that's an unusual amount of hair on the child's back, and the consistency of it made me concerned that actually it did represent lanugo hair growth, which would be abnormal.
Do you recall in the review of the record seeing any other indication that Benji might have lanugo?
I don't believe it was previously mentioned in any of the other visits during the year or so before his death.
And I'm not saying necessarily lanugo specifically, but any other observations made by a medical professional that could be interpreted to mean that Benji has lanugo? Do you recollect?
None that were mentioned on any of the exams that I reviewed.
Did you review the autopsy findings?
Yes, I did.
What in the autopsies did you find important as relates to forming your ultimate opinion as to whether Benji suffered from malnutrition and starvation?
Well, there were a few findings that were very concerning, and probably the main one that caught my attention was that he was described as, I'm sorry, let me find it. Well, he was described overall as being cachectic.
What does cachectic mean?
Cachectic means that the body appears to have lost so much weight that it's distinctly abnormal, and also in the range of being a potentially life-threatening or potentially severe disease process at work.
Okay. Was there anything else in there that you considered as it relates to whether he suffered from malnutrition and starvation?
Yes. In his internal examination, Dr. Molina noted that the thoracic and abdominal cavities revealed, in her words, a paucity of adipose tissue and diffusely atrophic musculature, and also that the abdominal pannus averaged 3 millimeters in thickness.
So, I want to talk about, kind of break that down a little bit. As it relates to belly fat, stomach fat, would you expect that to be present in a child Benji's age?
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, it's normal for all of us, including children, to have some degree of fat in our skin, underneath our skin layer, and also in and around the organs of our chest and abdomen.
As it relates to, did you already mention the mesentery? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I hadn't mentioned that yet.
As it relates to the mesentery, why would you expect fat on that part of Benji's body?
So the mesentery is a really thick membrane that supports our intestines and kind of keeps them in place, and then also the blood supply to the intestines goes within that mesenteric membrane, and it's normal for there to be a pretty substantial amount of fat in and on that membrane.
And how did Dr. Molina describe the mesentery?
She described it as translucent with an absence of adipose tissue.
What does that mean?
Well, translucent would mean that you could see through it, so it was very thin. And then second of all, adipose tissue is one of the terms that we use in medicine for fat tissue. And she noted that basically there was no fat tissue in or on that mesenteric membrane.
Is there anything else in the autopsy that stood out to you as it relates to forming your ultimate opinion?
Yes, when she examined Benji's heart, she noticed that there was also no fat tissue or adipose tissue on the membrane that surrounded the heart. And that's also really unusual.
Your Honor, I'm going to emphasize at this time for his qualifications on how to perform an autopsy and interpret that, because at this point, he has not been qualified as a forensic pathologist.
If I'm understanding Dr. Molina, he is taking Dr. Molina's findings and creating them.
That's correct.
And this is her autopsy.
Yes, which is an evidence.
Okay, that would be overruled.
And specifically, his qualifications on how many times he has actually been in the autopsy to see whether you would normally see it or not see it. Because his expertise, while in child abuse, does not translate to the forensic pathology or how often you would see it or not see it.
Understood, Mr. Williams, your objection is overruled.
So talking about that fat that was absent around the heart, would you expect to see that?
Yes, I would have expected that you would have some fat tissue on that membrane around the heart.
Was there anything else in the autopsy report that informed your opinion?
She, Dr. Molina made note that she could not find a thymus, which is a part of our immune system that's it's a thin organ that's present at the base of the neck. And so that would be, in a 4-year-old, pretty unusual not to be able to find any thymus tissue.
What is the purpose of the thymus?
It makes some of the white blood cells that are involved with our immune response to infections and infections basically.
And does the thymus always stay the same size?
No.
What's the pattern of its growth or decline?
Well, thymus organs tend to be pretty big at birth, and they do gradually go down in size as we get older, but they're usually present throughout childhood. And so one of the things that can affect the thymus and cause the thymus to become small early is chronic stress.
Okay. So chronic stress can cause the thymus to atrophy or decrease in size or eventually go away?
Yes, our immune system is a big part of our body's response to stress. And so if someone's under chronic stress and the immune system is being overtaxed, then one of the things that happens is that the thymus can start becoming too small too early.
And, would malnutrition be a possible stress?
Yes, absolutely.
Would starvation be a possible stress?
Yes.
Was there anything else in the autopsy findings that you found relevant to informing your opinion?
Dr. Molina also made note of the fact that his body mass index was low at 12.9. And normal would, in this age, would probably be around 15 or 16.
Dr. Luker, I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit number 18 for identification purposes. Do you recognize this?
Yes, it's a printout from the World Health Organization of the expected body mass index for different ages of boys.
Okay. And does this include the percentiles?
Yes, it does.
Fair to say about 50th percentile is the median, the middle of the group.
Yes.
And is this the same type of data from the World Health? Is this the same organization, the World Health Organization, that you use as far as states exhibits 216 and 217 relating to growth charts?
Yes.
And this, as it relates to a child at 4 years and 11 months, what would the 50th percentile be?
The 50th percentile would be 15.2. And sorry, I think it might be helpful also just to explain that body mass index is a more detailed way of comparing height to weight.
Okay.
Because it takes into account variations in body composition or body presentation that just comparing height and weight doesn't necessarily.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as states exhibit number 219 for identification purposes. Does this appear to be from that same World Health Organization?
Yes, it does.
And this is a little different than states 218, correct? And that this is the Z-score. It relates to the Z-scores.
Yes.
And what was Benji's BMI at the time of his death?
12.9.
Using this pen, can you mark at 4 years and 11 months where 12.9 would be?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And looking at that, what Z-score is he on?
He's at -2.
Okay. The jury's heard some testimony as it relates to Z-scores, but what do these numbers mean? -1, -2, -3, 1, 2, 3, 0.
Okay, so it's a statistical calculation.
Okay.
And basically the average of a population is considered a Z-score of a zero.
Okay.
And every variation from the average, instead of saying, well, he's 5 centimeters over or 5 centimeters under, sometimes it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what that means. Is that bad or good or what? It's expressed in terms of how far away from the average it is.
Okay.
And so it's called standard deviations. And so this means that he's 2 standard deviations below the mean
as to what percentage of the population would be heavier or having greater BMI than him?
So two standard deviations, if I recall correctly, is at the 3rd percentile. In other words, that he would be heavier than 3% and lighter than 97%.
Okay, so 97% of the population, world population, would have a greater BMI than Benji.
Correct.
As it relates to the autopsy, no one specifically talked about some of the vitreous fluids. Were you able to review that?
Yes.
And were any of the vitreous fluid findings important to you or relevant to you in informing your opinion?
Yes.
Which ones? If any?
Well, the one that really is the most striking is that his sodium level in his vitreous fluid was quite elevated. It was 159.
What does that indicate to you?
That he was dehydrated.
Okay. Is there, again, that relationship between starvation and dehydration?
Yes, it's one that we very frequently observe, and it has to do with the fact that if someone's not getting enough food, they're probably not getting enough fluids either. And so dehydration is a real commonly seen part of malnutrition.
Was there anything else on the autopsy that you reviewed that ultimately informed your opinion?
So, he also had a very low, what's called blood urea nitrogen when he was, that was noted during his evaluation in the hospital the day before the autopsy, when he died. And blood urea nitrogen typically is associated with, if it's elevated, it's associated with dehydration, and if it's low, it's associated with a very low protein content in the body. And so it's a little difficult to reconcile with the fact that there were other indications of dehydration, but it does raise additional concern about the degree of malnutrition that he was experiencing.
So that blood urea nitrogen was low, which indicates low protein?
Yes, it's a breakdown product of the normal metabolism of protein in the body. And if you don't have enough protein in your body, then you can't metabolize the protein enough to really generate a normal level of blood urea nitrogen. And a very low level like this of 3 is an indication of overall protein insufficiency or protein deficiency.
Okay. Is there anything else on the autopsy report?
No, I'm sorry, I think we've covered the important findings. in my
Okay.
opinion.
Are compulsive behaviors associated with malnutrition and starvation?
Well, I don't know if they're necessarily associated. I don't know that they're always seen, but we certainly see children who have been chronically malnourished who start exhibiting abnormal behaviors around food.
Okay. Would chewing on the fingers, could that be a compulsive behavior
Yes.
associated
And
with?
Your Honor, I'm gonna object to leading.
I would suggest an answer.
I'm trying to process the question. That is open
chewing on the fingers be one of those compulsive behaviors that might be associated or be a sign that the child is malnourished or
Yes.
starving? What about eating their own feces?
And again, objection, it's leaning.
I understood that considering the witness and the form of the question, I'm going to overrule the objection. You may answer.
Okay. So that wasn't discussed in the autopsy report, but in answer to your question, yes, children who are experiencing deprivation of food have been known to eat their own feces.
Okay. Were you provided pictures of Benjamin prior to your testimony?
Yes.
And did you review those in forming your ultimate opinion as to whether Benji suffered from malnutrition and starvation?
Yes.
Sorry. I'm going to show you what's already been admitted as State's Exhibit number 76. There's been evidence of this photo on the Got it. This photo was taken on or about April 4th, 2021. And this photo on the right was taken on August 14th of 21. Do you notice a difference in Benji's body composition as it relates to these two photographs?
Yes.
And what do you notice?
Well, I'd say the picture on the right is how thin he is on his legs, and especially his trunk is very noticeable, and his arms. We can't really appreciate the arms or the trunk very well in the picture on the left because of his clothes, but you can certainly, it certainly appears that there's more body tissue on his legs on the left picture than on the right. And the other thing, of course, is really quite dramatic is the change in the appearance of his face. Whereas the child on the left, that picture, he has normal appearing cheeks, whereas on the right, he appears to have lost a lot of the body fat in his cheeks and appears very gaunt in that way.
Dr. Luke, I'm going to show you what I'm going to mark as State's Exhibit number 220. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
And what do you recognize it to be?
It is a scientific paper that Dr. Nancy Kellogg and I wrote about cases of child starvation that was published in 2005
Okay, and where was this published?
in a journal called Pediatrics.
And what is pediatrics?
It's probably the leading scientific journal in our field, the specialty of pediatrics.
And what was the title of this paper?
Criminally prosecuted cases of child starvation.
And what was the goal or intention of writing this paper?
Dr. Kellogg, over the previous couple of years, like 2002 and 2003, had been consulted on about 12 cases where children had starved either to the point of death or nearly so. And she was struck by how similar in some respects the cases were, and asked me to collaborate with her on presenting those 12 cases in a way that highlighted the similarities amongst them.
Okay. The cases that you used, were there, did they all contain judicial findings?
Yes.
Okay, so these cases included children whose caregiver or somebody was prosecuted for the starvation.
And Your Honor, can we approach?
Yes.